what extent do we mean coming out, and what extent do you recommend coming out?
Okay, well, that's the second part. Maybe that's the discussion we should have. I mean, I think it's an individual thing, how people come out and express their recovery. I think people have a right to keep it to themselves if they want, but the question is at what expense? In the rooms, obviously, you're kind of coming out because you're saying, "Hi, my name is." I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic or I'm whatever. So you're kind of coming out, right? In an AA meeting?
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, what happens like when you leave the rooms and and you're applying for a job? And there's a lot of dilemmas here. Like, let's take the job situation. Like, do you recommend that people be truthful on their application and say, I'm in recovery?
Maybe they don't ask that question, though, do they?
Well, sometimes they do.
They do.
Sometimes they do.
Depends where you work. If you're working at a treatment center.
Well, yeah. Well, that's different. I thought you meant on the just regular.
So I just want to backtrack for a second here, just to kind of recap a little bit of what we're going to be discussing. So basically, a lot of people, when they first get clean and sober, they make the decision to the only people who know about it are their immediate family, because obviously they probably went through that with them. Sometimes not even that. Right. Or then there are the people in the rooms or the people who help them get sober. And then other than that, they're basically leading almost like a secret life in their recovery. Right. So the topic that we want to discuss tonight, and the topic we want to kind of go over a little bit here is if that is a good idea, if that is beneficial to your recovery, if it can hurt your recovery. So that's kind of where we want to go with that. So you're saying, sometimes you go in for a job interview and say it is at a treatment center and they ask for it. I mean, do you think you're legally obligated to tell them?
I don't know about the legal ramifications, but I know in a rehab center they would ask you for, I guess for certain positions, especially tech positions, support positions.
Sure.
And even for therapists. I mean, I've worked with therapists that are in recovery. Usually like half are in recovery, half have no addiction problems. And they will ask them, are you in recovery? And usually I think they'll look for at least some places a year, some places will look for 2 years. But I'm thinking more about the guy that, or the woman that applies at the sub shop. And, they don't always know what's legal and what's not legal, and they can very easily be misled by questions. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how long have you been living here? And, where do you live? I mean, how do you get here? And they might, be smart enough to put 2 and 2 together and figure out maybe that person is in a halfway house or in a sober living house or what have you.
Well, it's West Palm Beach, so there's a good chance.
Well, yeah, I mean, but still, but people have their prejudices. And then, there are people that if they know someone is in recovery, whether it be, just out of recovery, might be a little more problematic. Mm-hmm. And they're looking for a job and they might want to know, does this guy have a problem with drugs or alcohol? And what happens if this person discloses? Should he disclose? Should he not disclose? If he doesn't disclose and then it comes out, what might happen? Might he get fired? It's the whole question about honesty, because I guess the 12 steps teach you to be honest and be,
right.
And to basically step up to the plate. And here, now you're stepping out into the mainstream world, which may not necessarily be totally accepting of your sobriety. Right. Maybe people in the rooms are saying, bravo, you've got a month behind you, way to go, keep doing what you're doing.
I don't think it's anybody's business, unless,
okay.
I really don't. I mean, they don't ask you what nationality you are when you go to work someplace.
Yeah.
I mean, religion.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's private. I mean,
yeah.
If these people, I know how it is being desperate at a job and just taking whatever you can. But if I ended up having a choice, I wouldn't want to work for somebody that asks. I mean, first of all, they can't. I've never seen an application with "Are you in recovery?" on.
Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say let's say forget about a rehab, but let's say you are in a rehab. Okay, so you're in a process of recovery. You're not using. you going to a rehab during the day, but you need a job, right?
Right.
You need to pay your rent. You're probably living in a halfway house, whatever. And but you need, again, they're encouraging you to go out and get a job. They're putting a lot of pressure on you to get a job.
Right.
And now you find this assisted living community down the street, and you happen to be a cook or a chef, right? And you figure I can get a job, re-enter society, right? Well, and first thing they're going to do if you're in the healthcare field is they're going to drug test you.
Right.
And what happens if, let's say, you've used the substance recently?
Well,
I mean, what happens if you used it recently and now
then you don't get the job.
Yeah, but now you just got into a rehab. Now you just got into a rehab and you need a job.
But you used.
Yeah.
Okay, then they need to not look for a job, I guess. I mean,
But
well, then they shouldn't be in rehab.
But
I'm just saying because when I lived in them, if you used, you were out. It doesn't work that way.
yeah.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, but let's say
depends
you
on
smoke.
what type of rehab, inpatient, IOP. If you're living in sober living,
Right.
even if you're in sober living and you pop on a test, they're going to make you leave.
But let's say pot. I mean, it can stay in your system for a long time. Let's say you're clean for like 3 weeks now. Okay, and let's say you're going to meetings, you're finally in
Right.
rehab, you're doing all the right things, but you need a job. And now you apply and you don't pass the drug test,
It's a pretty black and white thing, in my opinion, though.
Yeah.
If you fail it,
Yeah.
I don't
You
care
fail
if
it,
you're
it
in
doesn't
recovery
matter.
or not. You fail a drug test, you're not getting a job with me.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless. And even if I explain to someone, like, hey, I'm in recovery, it's been 3 weeks.
Well, you
it's
haven't
like
been in
this
it
or
long
that.
enough.
Right.
Okay, well, that's the question. I mean, like, how long should you be in recovery before,
I think it's a bad
you get a job? And
that's a good point, too. I think it's a bad idea. And Dr. Drew actually brought this up when we interviewed him, that a large problem with celebrities as to why they relapse so often, why like they're so unable to sustain recovery, a lot of the times is because they go back to work too quickly and they put that too much pressure on themselves and they don't put enough time towards their recovery first. So go ahead.
For the general public, I would not volunteer that information to an employer.
No,
probably not.
And depending on what area
it's
I'm
none
living
of
at
their
the time,
business.
South Florida is a different world.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Recovery is everywhere.
More
People in
likely.
recovery have a lot more job opportunities. But if you're in the Midwest, the prejudice and the stigma attached to anyone, that has an addiction issue, whether they're in recovery or not, makes you a liability to an employer.
Right.
Unless the employer has had addiction issues and is compassionate to that.
And understands it. Right. South Florida, they basically should include on the applications,
Yeah.
are you not in recovery?
Yeah.
Because everyone down here is in recovery. But I was thinking the same thing for the rest of this country. I mean, it's pretty unusual to find somebody. So I think my advice would be different to somebody down here, that it's a much more open environment down here. And you could talk about it more because it seems like everyone's in recovery.
Absolutely.
Or as opposed to going to like
Ohio
and walking into a place and telling them you're in
obviously,
recovery.
but like you could have 6 months clean and you could apply for a position and you don't fill it out on the application. But again, the employer has way of, especially when you're dealing with young kids that are very unsophisticated, don't really know what's legal and what's not legal. And then they're asked the question, like, have you ever used drugs or alcohol? Or they might ask, like, where do you live? And, you fill it out on the application and they do a search and they find out, well, John Smith lives at a halfway house.
Halfway.
Well, is he using drugs? Is he in recovery? Should we hire him?
So, I was thinking about it too, that don't you think, Irving, that you probably have a better prognosis for, say, someone who's in treatment? Don't you think a patient would have a better prognosis if they were completely open about their recovery?
I think it's better to be completely open, but I think, we're living in the real world. I think that's what you just spoke about. The stigma attached to anything, to having anxiety, to having depression. To me, they're people that are recovering from anxiety. I used to suffer when I was younger from extreme anxiety. So I always consider myself a recovering, not an addict, but, recovering from anxiety.
Sure.
And what the difference is, everyone lives with anxiety. but I've learned to channel my anxiety now. And I'm teaching others when people come into my office and they're depressed or they're anxious. And sometimes they numb that through drugs, because a lot of times, drug use or alcohol use or gambling is just really, it's a disease in and of itself because there's physiological components to it, there's psychological components. But as I've said, just like any illness, you've got to take responsibility for it, right? If you find out you're diabetic or you have heart disease, the fact that you have a label for it doesn't mean that it negates the responsibility of taking care of yourself,
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So what was my point? I kind of went off track.
Welcome to Recovery
What was
Live.
your question?
That's what we do. No,
Yeah,
that's what
kind
we
of
do.
late in the evening.
I have no
now.
idea. No, so the question was, do you feel like the patient has a better prognosis if they're more open about their recovery?
I think that the more open you are, I think it's important for yourself to be open and honest. The thing is, the world is not always going to be accepting of it. I mean, that's the other thing. We're talking about expectations. And it doesn't mean that if you're open and honest, yes, I'm going to get that good job. I'm going to be accepted by this group of people.
Right.
Or, because it could backfire. I mean, the reality is it could backfire. Just like when I have a support group that I run every other Tuesday for people who have anxiety and depression, and they raise the same issue. They feel very comfortable within the realm of the group. They might feel a little less comfortable sharing with family members, maybe the immediate family members. Now we extend it out to like aunts and uncles and grandparents that, maybe not. Friends, maybe close friends, maybe not so close friends. The same thing with addiction. It's like, how far do you extend this disclosure? So yeah, ideally coming out, I think, is the best thing for you. I think it's a healing process for you. But the reality is you will have to deal with the ramifications or the consequences of, coming out, so to speak. And, even though like on an application, it's not going to ask you may necessarily, do you do drugs or have you ever done drugs in the past or whatever, there are ways of kind of going around the interview process. And we're dealing with a lot of kids in rehab they're young, they're 20, 21. And emotionally, they're stunted development. They're like 15,
12
16.
or 13. Yeah.
Right. I'm even actually giving them credit.
I was like 12 or 13, right?
You know what I'm saying? And here they go out to a place of employment hoping to get a job. And it's a challenge for them. And they don't know, the guy is kind of feeling them out and asking them where they live and how they're going to get here. And they can see maybe they got here on a bicycle or somebody dropped them off. Right. Well, the guy can't afford a car. Where does he live? Well, then they kind of know. Well, he lives in a neighborhood frequented by halfway houses, sober living houses, and of course people trying to solicit them to sell them drugs. So they're putting two and two together and saying, well, unless they're in recovery themselves, they might say, I'm not sure that I can trust this person.
There's you can be in recovery. There's a lot of different types of recovery, and you don't necessarily even have to be a drug addict to be in a type of recovery, as you were just saying, Irving.
Right. You can be recovering from anxiety, recovering from depression. You can be recovering from a relationship, gambling. There's a lot of different forms of recovery, and I agree with you that there's a lot of different definitions to recovery. So maybe one person's recovery is not another person's recovery. So maybe a person who goes through the 12 steps figures that everyone who does that and follows that path is on the path to recovery. And maybe another person follows an alternative program and it works for them. We have to recognize that there are exceptions. It's not always one size shoe fits all. And, that may piss off some people in the AA community, but it's a reality. There are alternative groups, and there are, and AA by definition is an anonymous, that's the ironic part. It's anonymous, and you share your first name. And yet, on the same token, like when you get out there, the question is, how much do you disclose? And at what point do you disclose? Because I think it's a process. So for Blake, I think, Blake, you came right out and you said, I'm in recovery, I'm recovering whatever, and you just kind of cleanse yourself of this. You figured, I might as well just come clean. Everybody's going to ask me questions about it. So I'm kind of putting up this banner out. Yeah, I'm in recovery. I'm open to it. Things are only going to get better. Maybe previously unaware of the fact that, they had a problem with drugs or alcohol. That would be maybe more prevalent in large cities or large urban areas, where you're going to come in contact with mainstream society that may or may not be accepting of recovery. Okay, so here's another question. What about like a weekend binge drinker? They do well during the week. They have a successful job. They have good friends, and they go party on the weekend and they go crazy. I had a friend who was a binge drinker and alcohol, and he died. He killed himself. So just on binge drinking.
That's where it crosses the line of alcoholism, or just someone who likes to get really drunk on the weekends. I think there are a lot of people who confuse that, who they're a regular drug user, or they like to drink alcohol on the weekends or whatever, and they go to a little bit of an excess, but they're not actually an addict or an alcoholic. They're not doing addict or alcoholic tendencies besides using the substance.
Yeah. But what happens sometimes is it starts off as a binge drink, and then it spills over past the weekends into other areas of your life.
And that's where the tendencies come in. Because let's be honest, I mean, you guys are in recovery now, but addiction and alcoholism is not so much about the substances. Substances is what we're using, but what about
the symptom of our issue?
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
I mean, under it are all the addict and alcoholic tendencies and the behaviors that come along with addiction. So that's where it crosses the line. So is that weekend binger, do they have that whole iceberg under the water there?
Okay. Yeah, well, they might have the recognition or the rationality to know that their job is in jeopardy during the week if they drink or they do drugs. They know it's going to have a negative impact.
Right.
Now they have Saturday and Sunday off. They don't have to go to work. Now they know they have the freedom to go party and do whatever they want.
So Greg Lewis in the comments made a comment about users and abusers. What's the difference? The person can use and not abuse. The abuse, I mean,
here's the thing.
That would be a weekend warrior to me.
There's definitely a couple substances, by the way, that I don't care what you say. Like if you're using them, you've got a problem. Like if you're using heroin or
hardcore fentanyl.
Right. Yeah, if you're using fentanyl, if you're smoking meth or something,
smoking blues on foil.
Right. Chances are, I don't care if you do it on the weekends, you've got a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Normal people don't smoke meth just occasionally.
It never happens.
Yeah. Right. I don't think
one time last 3 weeks.
Right. I don't think you can smoke meth occasionally.
I used to do that with crack.
What, just occasional crack smoking? And then
yeah. I might do it for 2 or 3 days, but then I wouldn't I didn't do it for a year one time.
But were you doing other substances in between?
I was drinking.
Yeah, okay. So
but it took me drunk to go there to do that. And then I wasn't drinking all telling you.
Do you think there's a group of girls that get together on the weekends? Guys, I got the craziest idea. Girls' night out. We're going to do some meth. Just picked up a baggie of this crystal right here. We're going to go crazy tonight.
At the bottom of every beer is a crack pipe and a syringe for me.
You know what's very interesting? Sure. We use the term alcohol and drugs. We separate alcohol as if alcohol is not a drug. And sometimes we use the term alcohol and other drugs, but to me, alcohol is a drug. And the thing is, the ironic part is, we're hearing about all these overdoses now on opiates, right? It's an epidemic. It's all over the world. And it's all over this country. And it doesn't make a difference whether you're in Delray Beach or you're in Iowa and Idaho. It's starting from the small towns to the big cities into the suburbs. It's really a national epidemic, right? Would you guys agree?
I would agree.
Right?
In fact, by the way, Trump did declare, or he made a promise to declare, I'm not sure if he officially did it or not, that there is a national opioid crisis going on,
Okay.
a state of emergency.
Okay. Well, it's about time. It's about time that we recognize this is a national health problem. But you know what? The Surgeon General was talking about it for years, and nobody did anything about it. You know?
I agree.
I mean, what are we going to do about it now that we recognize that? Maybe we'll bomb the hell out of the opiate dealers or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
With fire and fury.
Probably.
We'll take them out with fire and fury. Okay.
But you know what?
Believe me.
What concerns me is like alcoholism. Like, that's like a socially acceptable drug, right? And earlier, during the commercial, we were talking about the fact that, a lot of business people conduct business drinking. They get together.
Yeah.
They, before they even talk about business, and this happens all over the world. Guys and women, they sit down, they have drinks, and like, what does the person in recovery do now when he's supposed to sell somebody this product or this service or whatever it is? And, they're all like boozing it up, and he's like drinking, ginger ale, whatever.
You're just supposed to say he's not drinking when he's working.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of pressure. But there's a lot of
There is.
sure, but the reality is that there's a lot of pressure, and drinking and business seem to go hand in hand. Certain professions, just like the restaurant business and drug addiction, seem to go hand in hand.
Sales team that always after meetings.
So maybe
Right.
you're in the
Always
wrong job. That's what, like, maybe that is not the right position for an
Bartending
alcoholic
is
to
not
be.
good.
in.
Take a marketing job.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sell some
Yeah.
light bulbs that are
Sell some light
overpriced.
bulbs. Yeah. Go to.
trash bags.
If you're an addict or alcoholic, you belong in a call center, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I could never sit still that
you
long.
guys looked at me so serious. I'm joking. Do not go to a call center. I don't suggest that for anybody. But no, I mean, maybe that's something you have to look at. If we put our recovery first and alcoholism is that bad for you and it's that tempting, maybe it's time to get a new job. Go somewhere else that doesn't put you in awkward situations where you are around people who are drinking constantly, especially early on. I mean, I know people now.
Fit.
Right. Now I know people who've got 15, 20 years sober who can do that, and that's no big deal. I could probably do that right now, and it would be no big deal. Like, I would just say, hey, I don't drink, and just leave it at that. You don't want to see me drink.
You remember when James and Elena were at the
Yeah.
Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, absolutely. And right, they were bartending, and I worked as a waiter early on in my recovery too for a little bit. I mean, look, alcohol's around, and it's something that we have to deal with. It can be challenging, absolutely. But again, if you're honest with it, and I've always found humor to be a good way out of drinking.
Absolutely.
There's a good Robert Downey Jr. quote when people say, do you want to drink? And you say, no, I don't drink. I'm allergic. I break out in handcuffs.
Yep, absolutely.
And to me, that's always
Break
been...
out warrants and handcuffs.
Yeah, I break out in warrants and
I
handcuffs.
break out naked.
I've always said that. Yeah, right.
in the bushes.
Right, be like, you really don't want to see me drink. And, I mean, but I've done it before. People are like, hey, do you want to have a drink? Let's all take a shot. I go, no, seriously, you don't want me drinking. Like, it will end up very badly for all of us.
All of us.
Just make a joke. They're like, oh, you're one of those, and we all just laugh it off. I've learned to be able to laugh at myself in recovery. And,
Me too.
And the situations, that's how I've always gotten through those awkward moments.
The blessings of recovery
I don't feel
are unlimited, with being returned to a healthy state of mind and body, and being able to address life on life's terms.
Right.
And being in situations and being in on that slippery slope and having the tools that, the program provides for us.
Right.
Is just, I can't even put into words how grateful I am, and the network of people that has been provided through working a program and going to meetings. It's just, that's my life. I really don't know too many people that don't at this point in my life, because I'm coming up on 9 months, and I cannot afford to be around people doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be put in that position. I can go to a bar, but I bring somebody with me. I go watch bands. I have someone that has long-term sobriety, and he accompanies me. That's I take a sober companion just so I don't have that
Protect
temptation.
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suggest that for anyone. If you do not stop living when you get into recovery. You can still do the same things you were doing, but only more smart.
Right.
You know, and we've been in, you know, social settings together. I believe we have way more fun and valuable experiences clean
And
and
can
sober.
remember it.
And we can remember it.
Most importantly, yeah.
We all are in a positive mind frame, and you know, nothing bad happens. We get just as crazy, if not more so, and it just adds value to my life. The people in my life are very valuable to me. That's an asset to me.
But would you agree though that you've got to be very careful, even when you're with people that are in recovery, that have recovery longer than you have, because there are people that even have like 20 or more years of recovery, and then they do relapse. I mean, it happens.
I know people that have done that.
I do, but I don't. I don't think that recovery is meant to be. You don't have to walk around on eggshells.
No.
I don't think that it's that fragile. I really don't. I'm not a believer that it's that easily that you relapse that easily. I think if you're going to relapse, there's a plan
It's a
along
process.
before
No, I
you
agree.
go that
I
far.
agree. I'm just suggesting that it could happen. That sometimes just the span of time in and of itself is not a guarantee that a person is not going to
No,
relapse.
and
Well,
it's not
there
about
is
the
no
time.
guarantee.
It's
Right.
about what you've done in that
Yeah.
time in your recovery. And if
Yeah.
you are spiritually fit and you have a solid program and a solid basis of your recovery, then I
go
feel like you
anywhere.
can go anywhere and do anything. Now, am I going to go hang out in a bar every night by myself? No, I'm not going to do that, because you hang out in a barbershop long enough, you probably get a haircut. But
I get a buzz cut.
I can go anywhere I want to go as long as I have a reason to be
Okay,
there.
well, let me give you a hypothetical though. Supposing you moved out of this area, you moved into a new city. You knew absolutely nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have a job, or you had a job, but you really didn't connect with the people. And now you're looking for a place to go. Might you end up at
Do you mean
the
like
local
find
bar?
How about a
friends and stuff?
meeting?
Yeah,
See,
to
well,
find-
that's
How
the
about a
beauty of
meeting?
AA.
Well, yeah, sure, you could do that.
Oh no,
Companionship.
yeah.
I
I
work
found
a-
one in Costa Rica.
Right. I work a worldwide program.
Yeah.
Luckily,
Yeah.
that there's meetings everywhere. Now, what's funny is that I've also learned in recovery how much there is to do in life besides going out to bars.
Yeah.
There's more time in your life to
Right.
do these things.
There's
I
so
see
much to
mountains
do.
now.
Here's the crazy thing that I don't know if you guys know this. There's stuff to do during the day.
Oh yeah.
You can actually go and find activities to do during the day
Be
and
very,
meet
very
people.
productive.
Yeah, but I remember being in a town called Luray, Virginia. I don't know how it is now.
What's it,
It's about
Luray?
Luray, Virginia, about 100 miles west of Washington, D.C., known for these caverns. All I remember is, I think, stalactites are up here on top and
Stalagmites,
stalagmites.
yeah.
You remember those, like icicles?
I remember
They're caves.
geography class.
They're caves. That's all I remember. And I remember going in there, and that was the sleepy town. That was like Mayberry RFD. And I remember going with my sister at the time, and she was bitching that there was no, like the bowling alley was closed Saturday night. I mean, there was nothing to do. So the only place where people could actually get together on a Saturday night,
Town bar.
right, was at the Holiday Inn, and it was a dance, and there was alcohol being served. So what do you do in that case if that's the only game in town?